Okay. Mr. Zuber, would you call the roll, please?
Certainly. Commissioner Acharya is not here. Commissioner Bennett?
Here.
Here.
Commissioner Okan?
Here.
Best to throw everybody.
Very good, very good. And of course, we have our community planner, Jeff Goulet. And you all, welcome tonight, and welcome to the folks watching at home. Tonight, we have 2 agenda items, but before we get to that, we're going to talk about our last meeting, which was January 7th. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes of the January 7th meeting?
Support.
All right, I've got a motion by Commissioner Graham Hudek and support by Commissioner Zuber to accept those minutes. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Again, our agenda tonight consists of 2 items. Any late additions from staff?
Yeah, we just want to announce that Ms. Perkins is here also tonight. So
Sorry?
no additions to the agenda, and we just need to put on the record that Ms. Perkins is here tonight. So.
Yes. We have an addition to the board. Yeah. Okay, anything from the commission? Hearing none, seeing none, do I hear a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved. Support.
All right, got a motion by Commissioner Zuber and support by Commissioner Eggenberger. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, get right into it. The first agenda item tonight is a public hearing. Now, public hearings are just that. We actually invite you to speak on a given project when it's a public hearing. That's a requirement by law, quite honestly. And if you have something that you want to add or questions for the commission or for the project sponsors, that would be the time to do that. We ask that you sign our form up there, fill it out, so that we know on record. And then when you come to the podium, you state your name and address, and then briefly what it is that concerns you. So, with that said, our first agenda item is the 3rd amendment to the Mosseri consent judgment and S&S Homes, where we're considering rezoning this parcel from C2, community commercial, to R6, single-family attached residential, and amendment to the consent judgment. Jeff, could you give us the rundown on that, please?
Yes, the applicant, S&S Homes, is proposing to amend the Mosseri consent judgment for the remaining 2 acres known as commercial site number 2 within that judgment to allow the rezoning of the parcel to be rezoned from C2 community commercial to R6 single-family attached residential. About 18 to 20 years ago, the south 10 acres was rezoned to R6, which is now known as Abbey Woods. The conceptual plan that's included with the amendment would permit construction of 11 residential units, including 5 2-unit buildings and 1 single detached unit. This is a little bit peculiar because the zoning is, normally the Planning Commission doesn't review consent agreements, but the consent agreement ties it to zoning of the property from way back when there was zoning action on the property by the Mosseris, and Mayfair at that time intervened in the lawsuit, and there was a big agreement on several sites within the area along Joy Road. So this is commercial site number 1 within that agreement. The proposed conceptual plan for 11 units comes out to about 4.8 units per acre, which is a little bit less dense than Abbey Woods. Abbey Woods is 5.5 units per acre. They've got 55 units on 10 acres. The layout requires modifications to building separations and site setbacks as described in Exhibit C. There were existing modifications granted with the amendment number 2 for Abbey Woods that required 35-foot setbacks from the site boundaries and rear separations of 75 feet. In this particular case, the developers requested a rear separation of 58 feet from the rear-to-rear separation of the new units from the existing units along the north boundary of the existing Abbey Woods, a 33-foot setback from the rear of the units to Joy Road, and a 31-foot setback to the west property line. The conceptual plan does provide for all the stormwater to be on site. It has 1 access onto Joy Road, no access points onto Morton Taylor Road. Mr. Amon is here tonight to explain in more detail what the proposed agreement and rezoning incorporate, and to address some of the issues that the existing condominium association may have before we get into public hearing.
Thank you, Jeff. And if you would like to come up, Mr. Amon, and with that said, do I hear a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
All right, we've got a motion to open the public hearing by Commissioner Zuber and support by Commissioner Bennett. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Would you like to add anything?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it. I feel a little robbed that Gladys Knight did not sing the national anthem at the reading of the flag, but that's all right, though. We'll move ahead on a Super Bowl Monday. First, let me just thank you for the chance to be here tonight to talk about what has been a long-term project and process for this township, because literally the square miles in this area were ultimately settled by this consent judgment back, nearly 30 years ago or 20-some years ago. And so this is the very last piece of that process that comes along. And I think you'll hear tonight from residents of Abbey Woods, the existing condominium project, which I want to encourage you, I think is a great success story. That's become a great community, a great project into itself, of great neighborhood and great residents. And so they have very interesting and important concerns to be heard. I think we'll address those tonight, but I think I just want to, certainly in the context of Canton, to just step back and appreciate the fact that they're here, and ultimately everything we're talking about is a great success story from where we started when this process was a couple decades ago, when we were literally trying to figure out what would the neighborhood behind it look like, what would this condominium project look like that is called Abbey Woods, what would the shopping center look like across the road. And so this is the very last piece of that part of that puzzle. So in short, I won't bore you with a lot of legalisms and formalities and legalities in this. It really comes down to a basic proposition for the Planning Commission and for the township, as it does for my client, S&S Homes, as it does for the residents of the association. And that is, do we want to see this project developed as a commercial center under the C2 provisions of the ordinance now, or developed as a residential project? Do we want to see condominiums there, which would essentially look like the latest version of the last condominium built in Abbey Woods? It would be virtually identical. They've morphed and modified their units along the way in that project, and so they would essentially continue with that along in here. Or do we want to see a commercial project? And under this project is a little unique, as Mr. Goulet explained. It's under a consent judgment, so while we filed a rezoning application as the initiation of a process for the township, this really comes down to a Board of Trustees decision: is do they want to agree to amend the consent judgment based on whatever recommendation comes out of the Planning Commission as it relates to the rezoning. Currently, the consent judgment provides for C2 zoning on this site, which means it could have certain commercial uses like some grocery uses. I'm just going to get my, hang on here. Convenience goods, groceries, dairies, products, alcoholic beverages, baked goods, drugs, dry goods, video cassette sales, rental flowers, other resale establishments like carpet, furniture, hobby stores, equipment stores, and those kinds of things. And literally under the consent judgment, it provides right now that my client could build those uses right on this site. As part of the consent judgment, it also provides they would be able to put a masonry wall, essentially it says a poured concrete masonry wall, on the existing property line of the condominium project. And the only element of surprise left in the consent judgment as to whether it's 5 or 6 feet tall, and the township has some say in that conversation. So right now, as it sits under the consent judgment, S&S Homes could have the ability to develop up to 20,000 square feet of C2 space on this property, 1 to 5 buildings worth, for the kind of uses I described, or what they've requested tonight is essentially to do a residential project. Instead of having a commercial development with a masonry wall on the property line, that property line is currently 35 feet from the rear wall of the units backing up to the north of the site right now. So what they're proposing, instead of having a masonry wall on the 35-foot from those units on the property line, they're proposing instead to do a residential project, which the product would mirror essentially exactly with what's there, where the closest wall would be essentially 58 feet from the walls of the existing units. With patios, you take 12 feet off for each patio, so it would be 34 feet patio to patio, which, by the way, is farther than some patios are apart in the existing condominium project. There are patios 25 feet from each other within the existing condominium project. So really, we're at a point where the question for the township, for the developer, and for the neighbors are, would you rather see a commercial project on here, or would you rather see a residential project? One that the units mirror your content, your product, your units, or one that has a wall on the property line with potential commercial buildings along there. And so what's proposed here, and because it's a consent judgment, you're getting more information than you normally would in a zoning application. The consent judgment provides as an exhibit this conceptual site plan, which would effectively lock in what the setbacks would lock in the access off of Joy Road, not allowing any access or connection to the existing condominium project, locking in the basic elements of design of the project. So because this is a part of a consent judgment, these are part of the consideration tonight. Normally in a rezoning, you just get to talk about theoretical concepts about use. Tonight, you have a little more information, not only the theoretical concept of commercial versus residential, but we have the very specific information about masonry wall on the property line versus that being 35 feet from a unit to units being 58 feet from the existing units, and this layout of 11 units on there. The consent judgment as drafted provides for the modifications that would be required, bless you, as it relates to the setbacks and the fact there is one detached unit in here. By rezoning it to R6, we have the ability to do all attached, but it just doesn't work, and so we went with the proposal of 11 units as opposed to 12 and doing detached units. So with that, I think it provides a general description, and you're going to hear, I think, from residents of the association tonight. We've met with the board to talk about this project, to try to make sure we educate. There may or may not be conversation about whether or not this project is an expansion of the existing condominium or whether it's its own new condominium. And I'll tell you, it could be either way, but it's entirely up to the existing residents of the existing condominium association as to whether they want it to be an expansion. It would require a 2/3 vote of the existing owners to do it as an expansion. If they don't want it as an expansion of their condominium, we certainly can do it as a separate condominium project without that at all, because we don't connect to anything, we don't require anything from that. So that's an element not really part of the scope of what you're discussing tonight, but you may hear some conversation about it. That really would be a conversation we would have after, if in fact the rezoning was proposed for approval on that. I know Mr. Goulet referenced in the notes to the Planning Commission concerns about the patios, proximity to existing patios. I briefly addressed that by pointing out that the patios here along the south line of this site are in fact farther than patios are within the internal part of this project. I just want you to be very clear about this. The developer, the owner of the property, simply will not do these condominiums unless we're able to do patios on them. So if that becomes an issue, then we have the total discretion as to whether to do the consent judgment or not, just as the township does. And so if in fact we're able to rezone the property, we would really request that it be without any conditions as it relates to the placement of patios. Mr. Goulet appropriately raised the concern about patios as it relates to not only a setback, but really there's also an issue that we have to resolve ultimately with DTE, because they run the utilities in the rear of a site, and we have to make sure that the patios will work with DTE based on where they put the utilities. But that's a site plan issue, and it's not a zoning issue. And so if it becomes a zoning condition, I'll tell you right now, we will not accept it as a condition of zoning. We'll simply stick with the commercial. We'll go ahead with the commercial project, put the wall up, and then go ahead with commercial buildings up to 20,000 square feet in the site. I don't think that's a win-win-win for this community, for the residents, or for the developer. So we're here trying to seek a rezoning of the property to get a win-win-win. So with that, we're prepared to answer any questions from anybody that may come up and or from the Planning Commission.
Thank you. If you could, I don't know if you need to stay there since you're sitting very close.
I will
if there's
sit
any
there.
questions.
Yeah.
So
Great, thank you.
I'm going to start right from the front row and work back. So one by one, anybody have anything they want to add? Questions, concerns, anything at all based upon what you've heard so far or what you think? Come on up.
Hi, I'm Wendy White. I'm a resident that's going to be backed up to this property.
What's your address?
43528 Abbey Circle.
Okay.
Personally, my husband and I, Jeff, we would like to see residential and not commercial, just for property value sake, and also just a cleaner look I mean, I don't want to sit there and look at a cement wall. But that's just my input on it.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else? Come on up, sir. And please make sure that you fill out one of those slips. Thank you.
My name's Steve Demeter. I, too, am one of the people that back to the zone issue property, and would like to see it rezoned also to residential.
Okay, thank you very much.
Need my address?
Yes.
Yeah,
yeah.
Okay.
What is your address?
43534 Abbey Circle.
Okay. Thank you. You can just leave that on the desk there. Thank you. And next, anyone else? Yes, sir, come on up.
My name is Harold Shanks, and I also live in the condos that will face the back of these condos. I'm at 43542 Abbey Circle, and I would rather have this residential rather than having a wall that separates the Abbey Woods Association.
Very good. Thank you very much. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
I live in the older units that were built years ago, and
And your address?
3594 Abbey Woods Court, and I would prefer seeing residential than commercial.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Anyone else? Speak now. Up, come on up, sir.
Dennis Nowakowski, 43485 Abbey Circle. I would rather see residential than commercial myself. I have to fill out a thing, but
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Okay. I think that is it. Do I hear a motion? Oh, wait, hold on. We have one more.
I'm Filippo. I live at 43562 Abbey Circle. And as with anyone else, I concur. I'd rather see it be residential.
Okay, all right, thank you. Do I hear a motion to close the public hearing? Support. All right, got a motion to close the public hearing by Commissioner Okon and support by Commissioner Zuber. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, we're going to start with the commission. Commissioner Graham Hudak, do you have any
I'm
questions or
first, huh?
concerns?
Sure, I have a lot of questions.
Do you want me to start with someone else? Oh, okay.
So, Jeff, what does the master plan say for this?
Master plan is medium-high density residential, so it does support a rezoning to residential.
Okay, so that was our 5-year plan for this portion then.
Has been for a long time.
Okay, in this one, I mean, we talk about walls. You say if there's a commercial wall, it's 35 feet away, but there's still a wall if it's residential, correct? It's just farther away.
No, not if it's residential, there's no wall.
No walls. no.
So
There's
it's
no, there's no buffer required between residential.
Okay, would there be a berm at all? And where do the utilities lie then within that?
So that really comes down to a site plan issue as it relates to ultimate design. So we haven't gotten to the detailed engineering at this point in time. We would come back to you for a final site plan, which would provide in great detail where those utilities would be. Certainly, the intention is to plant additional landscaping. There is landscaping, obviously, along the rear of the current units, and so we would obviously want to enhance and put additional landscaping in there. So, but the question you raised as to where the utilities will end up will be ultimately determined in the site plan process.
And then you made a statement that if DTE doesn't basically allow this, you know, so if it says.
The patios.
Right, correct. Then you wouldn't do the patios and you would,
It depends on how big, if DTE needs to run a new line behind the units, and I don't know whether or not the service goes behind the existing units currently or not, and whether or not DTE can pull service for the new buildings off of that existing service line. If they need to run a new service line, it depends on how wide the DTE easement needs to be, because obviously if they record an easement along that property line, you can't build anything in the easement. So that would be one of the concerns is where they locate the easement and where the stormwater drain. And as Brian mentioned, that's really a site plan issue for the engineer.
And I'm absolutely, my day job, I'm chief legal counsel for the city of Detroit for capital and infrastructure, so I spend too many hours a day negotiating these easement agreements with DTE on a regular basis for major projects in the city of Detroit. I'm fairly comfortable that if in fact they have an issue as to location, we'll be able to resolve the ability to construct over them. They simply reserve the right to come in and rip anything up they want and not being willing to repair it at their cost. And so if we do this, we'll have to deal with it through our own cost allocation. So I'm pretty comfortable in the end that we'll resolve that issue. So
So basically, if someone has a patio and they need to get to it, they'll rip the patio out.
certainly will. DTE is not stopped by no one. I mean, it's township government, state government, anybody, they don't care. So, yeah.
You have to make sure that the condo's protected against that where they can help.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then what about a detention or drainage at all? Do you see any?
You see the 3 ponds on the property. There's a bioswale on the west property line, and you have 2 small ponds, bioponds, on the east property line. They've met with Wayne County, I believe, Brian, haven't you, to resolve stormwater issues on the site?
Thank you, Mr. Cooley. Yeah, we've had preliminary conversations with Wayne County, and they are generally fine with this design. It's actually one of the more progressive designs they've seen as it relates to that. So based on the location, we're using the locations of these also to provide some buffer for the unit owners from Morton Taylor and also the property to the west. And so, yeah.
Well, we did get some letters, a couple of letters here, and I'm just wondering, there's one question here which is interesting. So it's saying the existing Abbey Woods complex has been under development for 20 years. They're nearing completion. Does the developer builder have to comply with the 6-year statute for completion? Or are they grandfathered under a must-build clause?
So this project has, to the credit, quite frankly, of the owners and the buyers and the developer, they have not sought to just build it out and just lowball prices, whatever. They've literally waited till people come and buy. We have an existing list of prospective purchasers who could not get into Abbey Woods that we think are interested in purchasing into this project. But yet, the state law does provide that essentially the association's in charge. And so the developer doesn't have the normal kind of controls developers like to have when they're in construction on certain things, whatever. So, and that's really becomes an issue ultimately as to whether this is part of an expansion of the existing Abbey Woods or whether it's just its own new condominium project. But I'll tell you, I think, and the presence of the group here tonight indicates this is really, I'm very pleased. I remember the meetings, more than 16 or so years ago when we had the neighbors backing up to this project swearing they would never support any residential here because they wanted all the offices that were supposed to be 2- and 3-story offices that were originally planned for this, and the controversy around that. And this has turned out to be a great community of folks in there, so it's really been a great celebration for the community. So.
Then as you build, because of those retention ponds, if there's issues created, that they would have to fix it as part of.
Yeah, we would. So we are not connecting at all to the existing Abbey Woods stormwater management system. This will be entirely self-contained on the new site. So there'll be no interference or no interaction with the existing ponds or anything like that. So we won't be affecting that at all. So.
Thanks. And then Jeff, you meant by medium density, the master plan is R6, basically.
Yeah, 5 to 8 units per acre, right. This is, less than 5 units per acre, actually.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Zuber?
I don't have any questions. I'm impressed that we had several people speaking in favor. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm a little far from it. I'm impressed that we had several people speaking in favor of the project and nobody opposed to it, so thank you. It speaks well to your cooperation with the community.
We're equally pleased at the fact that they spoke up. So.
Well, like the folks that got up and spoke tonight, and thank you for your participation in this process. I, too, am in agreement that this much better to have residential there than commercial. I do have some questions, and they are more site-related, but basically I'm talking about intent. The first thing is just to understand the players. Even though this is part of the same Abbey Woods umbrella, there's not going to be a connection between this 11 units and the existing? Is that right?
Exactly right. No physical connection. Although the developer is the same underlying entity, it may end up being its own separate development entirely apart from Abbey Woods, or if the existing Abbey Woods owners so choose, we're going to make the request to them to consider an expansion of the existing condominium project. They have to vote by at least 2/3 majority to agree to do that. If they do that, it'll be part of the current condominium expanded as, and whatever, it's the same developer, same entity. If they choose not to, then we'll simply proceed and create our own separate 11-unit condominium project. But there'll be no physical connection, no access way, no storm or drainage or this, that, or whatever as it relates between the two. No common liabilities between the two as it relates to costs or anything like that, so.
So no driveway between one unit to the other to get
Nothing.
through? No sidewalk or anything other than the required sidewalk along
No,
Morton
and
Taylor
there, that's,
Joy?
thanks for asking that, but by the way, this would result in the completion of the sidewalk up to Morton Taylor and across Joy Road as well. That's
Okay,
right.
all right. The other question I have is, you explained that you couldn't put 12, so you went with 11.
Yeah, it
And
was
my
a-
question is, why are we shoehorning that last one in?
Essentially, it's not really much of a shoehorn. It really is, when you look at the footprint of the existing condominium units, this is what using that footprint at its expanded footprint ended up being, and so that's what fits. And simply it becomes a practical matter of, could we have had a wide open green space area? Absolutely. But the practical matters, giving up the ability to develop a commercial site on this property is an economic disadvantage, quite frankly, and because when you look at the cost per construction and everything that occurs out of commercial construction, it's a higher factor than residential. So the desire was to try to optimize as much as possible the economic outcome. There's no question. So that's why we went for 11 units when we realized we could not do 12. That's also why we didn't go for 10 units, though. So.
Okay, I understand that.
And Greg, there is a single unit in the existing Abbey Wood, so they do have a single unit in there also.
All right. Now, usually, when we get these kind of proposals, there's a 25% open space allowance in there, and this doesn't seem to have that.
You may be confusing it with the PUD project, which has an ordinance requirement of 25%. This is, in fact, a consent judgment project, not a PUD project. The entirety of the consent judgment project, it would be factored in with that, looking at the open space as part of that. But certainly, so that there's not such a requirement. And quite to the contrary, this project, it's interesting because you'll see some projects we strive to have a lot of room between units and all kinds of things. And other projects we have closer proximity of units. And a funny thing's kind of happened in Abbey Woods and some of the projects like this, they've actually developed a neighborhood. And the nature of the owners here generally tend to be either active adults, some are over 55 years old, and some may reside in warmer climates in the winter, some may not. And so we find that this layout and this sizing really works and is desired, highly desired, particularly because not only the proximity to neighbors, but also because of everything outside the units being maintained by the association. So no one's shoveling their sidewalks, no one's having to maintain their lawns or landscaping, those kinds of things. And that requires a certain economy of scale and proximity, and so that's what this design reflects.
But there's not a requirement to be 55 or over, right?
No requirement at all. It just seems to happen by the purchaser generally, so yeah.
And just to clarify with the planning commission, you see that big open area between the ponds and Morton Taylor Road? That's actually part of their site. There's a sanitary sewer easement across there. So it's something they can't build on, but essentially it adds as a big front yard between the ponds and Morton Taylor Road, which is open space. We have our sewer pump station right on the corner, so they can't utilize it to build on anything because we have a sewer force main through there.
Yeah.
So,
Mr. Goulet is right. The developer facilitated that, and it essentially was a gift long ago that at least it's giving now, so we appreciate it. So.
Okay, all right, that's all that I have. It looks like we have a separate meeting going on down
Well,
here.
we're trying to understand this.
Okay, all right, but do you want to,
We have many questions.
okay, why don't,
So what I understand from you, Counsel, is that your builder won't, they must have the decks.
patios.
Patios or
We want to
decks.
have the ability to have the patios certainly as a part of sales, so the units are essentially as identical to the units behind them as possible, because they've had purchasers for those units they've not been able to accommodate, and they're looking essentially for the exact same kind of unit they would have liked to purchase, which includes a patio, because although all of us, I think, desire to have patios, my guess is they're used less than 8% of the time in our life, but nonetheless, you want to have it, and so it's an important element of that, so, yeah.
Essentially, on Joy Road, where you have the patios back into Joy Road, essentially, you're going to have a landscape buffer along the
Right.
sidewalk along Joy Road, and it's going to be pretty close to abutting the back of the patio areas, so.
And I could give you the Google Earth pictures of the existing project where we have patios that are 25 feet apart to the rear, some that are 30 feet apart. These patios, none will be closer than 34 feet to the existing patios in terms of as the patios go. And by the way, I'm not sure when the township did this. When I built my home 22 years ago, patios weren't considered part of a setback. Raised decks were, but not patios. And so you could literally take a brick paver or a concrete patio back to pretty much wherever you wanted to do. Now, though, it's considered an element of setback. And so it's kind of a change.
Yeah, they have their own setback. They meet the same setback as a deck, which is normally 25 feet from the property line. So if it's over 4 feet in height, it has to meet the setback of the house. But generally, in most cases, patios or decks have to meet a 25-foot setback.
And so if I understand your recommendation is that you would want elimination of patios or decks from the proposed units backing to the south property line. Am I correct?
Well, that's a consideration, but as Brian mentioned, it's really going to be a function of the utility easements back there, so.
But it got down to Mr. Glay was concerned about DTE's practice and history of running utilities back there, thinking it's going to
If there ends up being a utility easement there, if the neighbors don't mind, I don't mind. The issue is if it's a separate condominium, these are pretty close to the property line. So if the condominium is expanded, then that property line goes away. So then we don't deal with setbacks anymore, we just deal with separation. So from a separation standpoint, it's okay. But if it's its own independent condominium, it's pretty close there, and they'll have to work out the utility easements. If there's a utility easement there, then the building department will have to determine whether or not they're allowed to build a patio in the utility easement.
Physically,
It's more of a
nothing-
practical issue.
Nothing
than-
changes.
yeah.
Yeah, physically, nothing changes, whether it's part of the same condominium or not. They're still the same distance. It's just the theoretical overlay of the legal description of it, so.
So Jeff, it sounds like you're not all that bothered about it, because either
Okay, that's all
the
we were
electrical
concerned
company will say they're okay with it, and it sounds like the neighbors are much happier with some patio
Residential.
close to their backyard than a wall.
as opposed to commercial. Okay.
It's all what people want.
Well, yeah, right, I mean, we're trying to make sure we're making it
We're all
work.
about the community.
I'm just trying to give you a comparison of what the normal standard is versus what they're asking for.
Okay.
so.
Okay, we thought perhaps you were
Okay.
really bothered, but apparently not.
But you're
Okay.
apparently not.
By the way,
just
just so
sort of-
you know, I never like to ambush Mr. Goulet, so we communicated late Friday evening and early Saturday morning around 6:13 in the morning or so via email on this to make sure we were very clear with each other on this. And so, yeah, and this was after we had the chance.
It's
to
that
move
dreaded
forward, so-
phone, yeah. so.
Yeah, that's right. So,
Thank you.
Okay, we're good over here.
Sorry for the confusion.
Okay, Commissioner Bennett? Commissioner
Yes.
Bennett? Commissioner Oken? Any thoughts?
Yeah, just a couple things. I actually live on Gatehouse Court, which is right behind the current condos, and very familiar with that territory and that intersection. And I am very much pleased to see residential there versus commercial. I'm happy that we'll finally complete some of the sidewalk. We still got the farm to go, but I think overall I like it how the new condos will match the existing ones. I think it's a great project, so looking forward to it.
thank you. We also recognize, the last thing the township needs is another vacant commercial strip center. And what happens, unfortunately, is when a new commercial center opens up, some of the tenants will just vacate their existing space to go to the new place. And so we did not want to create that dynamic or add to that dynamic as well, so.
Good, yeah. I concur with that. I worry sometimes about the commercial across the street.
Right.
Because I've seen what happened.
It seems to
over
be
there.
on, and God bless it, it's like hanging in there, but yeah.
And I don't have any heartburn over the patio issues. People tend to gravitate toward the thing that they can work with, and in buying those, they're going to see what the proximity is. So it's not an issue. Any further comments? Yes.
And just kind of a segue for the traffic also, there was a question about that. Jeff, do you know if it was in the plans to expand that intersection at all? Because we know it will
There's no
increase.
current plans that I know of about that. Everything gets reevaluated every few years, though, and with the road improvement program and with us coordination with Wayne County, You know, a lot of it depends on how much through traffic on Joy there, that would, that would need to happen. I'm sure that Wayne County will look at the driveway placement and make sure that the appropriate deceleration and acceleration lanes are there, and that they meet the setback from the intersection as required. That would be my main concern, is the setback of the driveway from the intersection, because they do require a certain distance setback from the intersection.
And I'll just add to that, Mr. Glaze is right. We've actually had the preliminary design work with the county, and so they've had input on that. They were relieved, and I think the township gets to take credit for this, because this is ultimately a quieting and a reduction of potential traffic impact. If this were a commercial center with a 7-Eleven or something else like that, you can imagine the daily in and out that would have been there. And with 11 units of active adult population, studies show it's much less traffic usage than you would have most residential, significantly less than commercial. So this is a win for the township as it relates to traffic in that intersection. So.
Our fire chief did bring up a question about internal access for fire in terms of how the roads end, and that'll be a site plan function.
Yeah, we've developed the hammerhead and other turnarounds, so, but we'll continue to work through them in detailed site plan, and you'll see this again as part of that project.
Okay, any further comments? Any?
No, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion. I move to recommend approval of the Third Amendment to the Moseri Consent Agreement for Commercial Site Number 1 and the proposed rezoning of parcel number 00999001702 from C2 Community Commercial to R6 Single Family Attached Residential District. There's a
Period.
subject to, okay, period. That's what I thought, but.
Support.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Zuber and support by Commissioner Perkins. Any further discussion on this motion? Hearing none, seeing none. Commissioner Zuber, would you call the vote, please?
Certainly. Commissioner Okan?
Yes.
Commissioner Bennett?
Yes.
Commissioner Eggenberger?
Yes.
Commissioner Perkins?
Yes.
Commissioner Graham Hudek?
Yes.
Commissioner Zuber, yes, and Chairman Green.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming to us, and thank you all for your participation tonight. Jeff, what is left? What's next?
Okay,
for
well, since this is a
project?
zoning action as well as an amendment to the consent agreement, the board will need to have 2 readings to amend the zoning ordinance to amend the zoning map. And at that point, once the zoning is approved, and they will also, as part of that, approve the amendment to the consent agreement if they desire to do that.
We would then follow up that ultimately with the site plan process, but that would be
Okay.
initiated by a new application, and
Okay, all right, well, good luck to you.
thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to give the room a few minutes to clear out here.
Nobody cares about the fire department?
See, I have to do more.
I think this was Congress or something.
Yeah.
Not necessarily.
All right, so
because
let's
that's
move
not a
on
public
to
hearing.
agenda item number 2. This is a site plan. Fire Station Number 2 expansion, where we're considering a special land use. This property is located north of Warren, between Lilly and Haggerty. Jeff, could you give us more detail?
Yes, the fire department and the township have been working diligently for the past year and a half on putting together plans for a replacement for Fire Station Number 2 on Warren Road. The township has acquired the properties to either side of the property to make room for the expansion. There's very few available locations in this area of the township, and this is generally where the fire station is needed to be. So one of the things they've had to do is, because the site is heavily impacted by wetlands to the north and by existing structures, we've had a couple of variances that were needed. They're moving through the ZBA process at the present time with the second variance. The special land use meets all of the other requirements for special land use. As a little bit unusual for us to require a special land use for our own buildings, but it is in a residential area, and we need to make sure that the impacts are accommodated and all of the buffers and other compatibility issues are taken care of. So Angela did the initial review of the special land use. The overall site is actually 4.68 acres. You can see the proposed fire station is hugged up fairly close to Warren Road as to avoid wetlands. Trying to maintain the existing fire station, which isn't shown here, but it's just It's kind of under the parking lot to the west of the proposed fire station. So that building will remain in operation while the new one's under construction. So one of the things as part of the site plan is the architect is working through a staging plan for access in and out of the property, for staging of materials and things like that. So other than that, we've got the architect and the public deputy director, Stockline is here to answer any questions. Mike Malone, the architect, is here to answer any questions you have about the project. Other than that, I'll leave it to them and they can answer any questions. Mike, I'm going to go up to the podium and.
Okey-doke. Thank you, Jeff. Welcome.
Yeah, good evening.
Is there anything that you'd like to add that Jeff?
I think he pretty well covered it. This is a simple request, obviously, for constructing a new fire station adjacent to the current one there. The rendering that we're proposing here is of the new station. We will maintain operation of the current station while this is being built, working through the site logistics and a plan that we're going to submit to the township here shortly. But we're really looking forward to this project. And
Personally, I like the exterior design, so I do appreciate that. It's a definite upgrade.
Just a little one, just slightly.
much needed.
All right, Commissioner Okan, do you have any comments? Commissioner Bennett?
Well, we were just having some trouble.
Oh.
This is Old Haggerty, isn't it?
What's that?
This is Old Haggerty, it's not.
To the south, yeah.
Yes.
Worried about that church where those nice little boys came and built their thing?
Eagle Scouts.
This is just to the west, yeah.
West.
Yeah.
No, it's actually on Warren Road. Yeah,
Warren, and it's not near Haggerty.
correct.
Yeah, this is directly across from the Copper Creek condos, so.
Now we got the vision.
You guys are good?
Looks good. Looks good.
Good,
That's
good, good,
Good for
yep.
us now.
You always have your own meeting down there.
How about down on this end?
We're going to have to stick Alan in between you next week, so.
Yeah, really. Got to split them apart.
Yeah.
Anything of concern? Any questions? Go ahead.
I just want to agree with Chairman Green as an architect. I'm very impressed with the elevation, so thank you for doing such a nice job.
What's exciting about this is that we're getting a new fire station. I mean, we took a tour of the old one, and the flooding was into the fire station. The walls and ceilings were separating, and it
The
smelled.
existing station sits into the floodplain currently.
Yes, and the room smelled like must. I don't know how those guys,
That's the guys.
that was the guys, it wasn't the room.
They need to
Okay,
shower
never
more
mind.
often.
Got to move that equipment out of there. I have a hockey player at home, I know. But I do want to ask, and so it's good, I think you guys are also looking at using renewables. I mean, this is a brand-new building, so we're
Brand new,
looking
yep.
at, what we can do with maybe some geothermal and
We're exploring multiple options for that, yes.
that's good, and even make-ready conduit, because we know electric vehicles are being pushed, by all the automakers now, so I hope we're looking at things like that, getting ready to put charging stations in and charging our fire trucks up and things like that. But no, looks good. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm pleased to see this too from a historical.
What's that? Am I interrupting you guys? The textile. No, it is. It will actually, in the long run, geothermal. I mean, you. Oh, no.
From a historical standpoint, I was an ambassador. My wife and I were ambassadors on Fire Station Number 1 when that was built from the Cherry Hill Canton Center location. So this kind of reminds me of that in a way, So I'm very pleased.
Yeah, we want $7 utility bills, not $300 utility bills. We'll get you there.
Like the rest of us have to pay. Well, I don't see any. Do I hear a motion?
Sure.
I have a question.
Oh, there we go.
You have a question?
Let me not ask it. Okay. I won't.
Come on. All right. Well,
Will there be a Dalmatian at the station?
that wasn't part of the proposal.
We can make that happen.
See, it was worthwhile.
That's right.
We did talk about that
I
before.
don't know, are you going to buy one?
Yeah, you could buy it.
I want to name it. I want to name it.
As long as it's not spots.
Would not do that. Would not
Already
do that.
taken, huh?
No, I think it's good. Thanks.
Greg, did you open the public hearing?
Pardon?
Did you open the public hearing?
Doesn't have a
Not a public hearing. Is it?
No,
No, it's not. It wasn't a public.
It wasn't listed that way.
no, it wasn't.
Need a public, is it special land use public hearing?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move to open the public hearing.
Support.
We've got a motion to open the public hearing by Commissioner Zuber and support by Commissioner Perkins. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Would anyone like to get up and speak about this project? You sure?
That's taken.
Do you
David,
support the
any
idea of
sug-
a Dalmatian?
Yeah, any suggestions for Dalmatian names?
Yes, it is.
You could be
are
on
tape.
TV. I figured. Oh, boy.
Write renewable energy down.
Move to close the public hearing.
Support.
All right, we've got a motion to close the public hearing by Commissioner Perkins and support by Commissioner Zuber. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, public
Thank you,
hearing
sorry
is
about
now
the
officially
confusion on the
closed.
agenda.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion.
Please
A
do.
question, though, I mean, is it always, would, the people that might have come, if they knew it was a public hearing, I mean,
They were notified.
they were, okay, so 300 feet
It was
within-
advertised, it was notified, yes.
As a public hearing?
Yes.
Okay, because it isn't on, I don't think it was on the agenda, or,
Not listed that way
Right,
in
it
the
was,
packet.
she just
But
had the
he's
header
right,
in there. It's-
special land
It
use
was,
always requires that.
it was noticed as a public hearing in the paper.
okay,
They sent out letters.
okay, thank you.
Good question.
Okay, carry on.
May I make my motion now?
Start at the beginning.
Okay. I move to recommend approval of the special land use, a special land use request for Fire Station Number 2 to be located on parcels identified as 041990003-000 and 04199006000, oh gosh, there's another one, and 04199008701, conditioned upon the applicant successfully obtaining the requested variance to the front yard setback from the ZBA, and based on the findings that the proposed use is consistent with the future land use map of the comprehensive plan and with the zoning ordinance. All necessary public utilities are available to the site. Traffic impact will be negligible because construction of a larger facility will not result in an increased number of runs. And any detrimental effects will be mitigated by adherence to zoning ordinance standards for light, sound, landscaping, et cetera.
Okay, we've got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Zuber and support by Commissioner Bennett. Any further discussion on that motion? Commissioner Zuber, would you call the vote, please?
Certainly, Commissioner Okon?
Yes.
Commissioner Bennett?
Yes.
Commissioner Eggenberger?
Yes.
Commissioner Perkins?
Yes.
Commissioner Graham Hudak? Yes. Commissioner Zuber, yes, and Chairman Green.
Absolutely.
Wow, okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
We don't give those
Up
out
to
very
you.
often.
Appreciate it.
Never say yes.
So they'll be back next month with site plan
The
approval.
site plan approval? Okay.
Okay.
All right. Very
Excellent.
good. Thank
Thank
you very
you.
much. We just have one other thing to do here. We've got to set a public hearing date for March 4th on the Oakwood Healthcare Fillmore Place rezoning. Do I hear a motion to set that public hearing?
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, anything additional from?
Yeah, your report.
Just to make a point of the 2018 Planning Commission Activity Report, generally required by the Planning Act. This is just a summary report of all of the applications and all of the projects that you and the Township Board and the Planning Department reviewed over the year, and just to give you a summary of the activity, the trends of what's happening and where things are being built, those kinds of things. So if you have any questions, just call me or email me, and I can get you information. We're in the process of updating the map that goes along with this to be posted on
You want to give an overview?
No,
the, sending what out to you?
It was part of the packet.
It's in your packet.
it's in the packet, sorry there.
You just didn't review the whole package.
Thank you,
So,
thank you for preparing that. Appreciate that.
Jeff?
Well, we're all concerned about the Dalmatian.
All right, do I hear,
Can we have Jeff give like an overview? I mean, he spent a lot of time on this. Do you want to give an overview of what happened in the community last year for your report? This is a very good report. I read it.
Speech.
We have to let Jeff
say a lot of stuff was built.
well, I think, over the past couple of years, we've seen an uptick in residential development. That's still occurring in a lot of our newer subdivisions in the west end of the neighborhood. From a commercial standpoint, probably the biggest projects last year were the redevelopment of the Michigan Avenue site where Tractor Supply and CubeSmart's going. That's a big redevelopment project. From a square footage standpoint, that's probably the largest. But we had 20 commercial projects come in and out, through the department last year. A lot of those you didn't see because they were small renovation projects and small additions. So that's kind of why those are clarified. A lot of the older buildings on Ford Road are being refaced, renovated, those kinds of things, and repurposed. Things like the Pizza Hut building is going to be a small, renovation with carryout. We've seen other refaces of a lot of tired buildings and strip centers, and we think that'll continue. A lot of the owners of some of the older strip centers, like where Szechuan is, and like the Lily Road Center, they're looking at refacing and improving their sites. We're making more headway with access management, getting interconnections between commercial sites and along Ford Road and Canton Center. So that's still a big, push to make sure that we have access management between sites. With Ford Road rebuild coming up here in 2022, we're trying to get those access points finished so when people are on Ford Road and go to a business, they don't have to go back out into Ford Road while it's under construction. So those are going to be very important for those business owners along Ford Road. Industrial standpoint, we have a lot of new industrial development along Haggerty Road and the Haggerty 2 Corporate Park West. There's 2 new buildings under construction. Sing Construction, I think, is finishing up a industrial building on Michigan Avenue. We had a site plan for about 980,000 square feet of industrial on Michigan west of Beck. That's kind of at a standstill until they move forward with that, but we're seeing a lot of activity in that area. I think over the next couple of years, our biggest push for new residential development will be along Beck Road with the old Oakwood site, which you'll see the rezoning next year, and along the Gettys Road corridor. So those are basically our 2 areas which haven't been built out yet. Other than that, we'll see a lot of smaller projects, probably 5-10 acres at a time, come in as infill development. So.
Very good. Thank you. Appreciate that. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Yes, I was just thinking of making one. You must have heard my brain.
2 great minds,
Support.
All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Well, thank you, folks.
Thank you.